Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a thick cloud of lavender-scented flour, stepping daintily across polished wooden floors in buckled shoes, and ducking politely so someone can dust our head with what is essentially fancy bakery waste. You are about to be powdered, curled, and quietly judged. Welcome to the curious etiquette of Georgian wig culture. He gestures for you to wait beside a modest fireplace where the coals are struggling to do anything useful. You sit down gingerly on a carved walnut bench, trying not to wrinkle your cuffs. Everyone's already staring at your natural hair with the kind of gentle alarm normally reserved for feral dogs at dinner parties. They signified social rank, profession, and even political leanings. He mutters something about your unusual occipital line. You pretend that's a compliment? Judges wore long, gray, full-bottomed wigs. Clergy kept theirs modest and short. The military had their own stern styles, and civilians. And fun fact, it is flour, or at least it was. Over time, wig powder evolved into a fragrant blend of starches, rice, wheat, or even crushed potato mixed with scents like lavender, orange blossom, and orris root. A few rebellious types experimented with blue, gray, or pink tinting, but not enough to suggest you're planning a coup. It's powdered to a gentle ivory sheen, with hints of crushed violet and a ribbon tied at the back in a neat queue. A man in full military uniform, his boots polished to oblivion. Everyone glances up. His wig is enormous, towering, impractical, magnificent. The assistant lifts it like a holy relic, then lowers it onto your head with reverence. Think of it as 18th century hair dye, but with more sneezing. You can feel the powder settling along your ears and the nape of your neck. Your scalp itches in protest, but you don't dare move. The assistant begins brushing the curls into position, using a small tool that looks suspiciously like something you've seen in a kitchen. There's more ahead, more pomade, more etiquette, more powder, and possibly a scandal involving flamingo feathers. For now, you adjust your cravat, breathe in the slightly yeasty air, and prepare to choose your style. Well, the bigger the better and less, of course. You were hoping to be taken seriously. It was all about balance, mostly absurd balance. Likely it was a blend of all three with a hefty dash of vanity and politics. Wigs allowed people to create controlled, elevated hairlines that symbolize sophistication and detachment from labor. Powder lingers in the air here like a soft fog, drifting through sunlight in lazy spirals. No one breathes too deeply. It's oddly peaceful, like the inside of a bakery during a snowstorm. If the bread were made entirely of starch and misplaced ambition, you arrive on a narrow cobbled street just after sunrise, the fog still curled around the gas lamps like a shy cat. You sit politely and glance at a pamphlet on the waiting table. It's a hand-illustrated guide to wig etiquette. Never powder in company. Always tip your valet. Never sniff during a powdering, no matter how badly your nose itches. All good advice, assuming you have a valet and a nose made of iron. The wigmaker's shop is just ahead. A tidy establishment with gilded signage and a display window featuring mannequin heads arranged in ranks of powdered glory. Inside, the smell hits you first. It's part musty upholstery, part pomade, and part whatever they use to mop the floors. Back in 1760, a bell tinkles politely as you push open the door, and you're immediately greeted by a bowing apprentice in a waistcoat far too small for his ambitions. You see, in this part of the Georgian world, especially in London, Paris, in colonial hubs of powdered prestige, showing up without a wig is a bit like showing up to a black tie gala in Crocs. Wigs are not just fashion. They are identity, wealth, profession, and politeness stacked in stiff, flowery layers on top of your skull. Your turn comes, and you're lead past shelves of horsehair, goat hair, and yes, human hair, collected from a variety of sources no one wants to discuss in polite company. You sit in a high-backed chair as the wigmaker, an elderly man with pince-nez and exactly two facial expressions, examines your skull like a sculptor surveying a particularly uninspiring block of marble. Now, here's the first mainstream historical fact of the evening. During the Georgian era, particularly the 18th century, wigs were more than just style statements. The wigmaker takes your measurements with a length of silk ribbon, skiing softly as he jots them down in a small leather-bound book. As you sit, you watch a delivery boy drop off a sack of powder. It's white, fine, and packed tight as flour. Historians still argue whether the shift from natural hair to full wigs was driven more by lice, syphilis-induced baldness, or the French court's obsession with looking mildly ridiculous. While your new wig is being fetched, you're offered tea. It's lukewarm and somehow tastes slightly of pomade. From the back room, you hear someone sneeze violently, followed by a soft pardon. As you're led back to the fitting room, the wigmaker's assistant presents your new piece, a medium-length, curled creation with just enough lift to suggest you have opinions. The weight is strange at first, like wearing a slightly judgmental cat. And then, just when you think you're done, a bell rings at the door. Another customer enters. You suddenly feel underdressed, but it's fine. You're here to learn, to drift, to bask in the lightly absurd rituals of the powdered elite. You're sitting under the flickering light of a whale-loyal chandelier, back straight, expression neutral, while the wigmaker's apprentice offers you a tray like he's presenting royal jewels. Except instead of diamonds, it's wigs, dozens of them. Tidy rolls of hair tied with satin bows, each one perched like a sleeping ferret on a velvet stand. It's stiff with powder and smells faintly of rosemary and stiff upper lip. It pours down past the shoulders in cascading curls and weighs roughly as much as a medium-sized toddler, once favored by judges and gentlemen of very serious importance. It carries the distinct air of someone who has never dug a ditch, but owns several books about ditch digging. You place it gently back on its stand. It's not the one. While early 18th century styles like the full-bottomed wig had dominated, over time men moved toward shorter, more practical options like the bob wig and the club wig. The latter featured hair bunched at the back like a little dumpling, practical for riding, drinking, and escaping awkward parties through garden hedges. A small curled piece designed to sit atop your natural hair, it became increasingly popular as full wigs fell out of favor in the later Georgian period. The name alone is promising. You could be a man with secrets. You could be a man who whispers to potted plants. Designed after the Battle of Ramillies in 1706, it became the go-to style for naval officers and anyone who enjoyed yelling broadside, unironically. Powder drifted onto the wrong coat could result in social disaster, at the very least, a stern letter from a duchess. Just enough pomade to say, "I take myself seriously," but not enough to start a fire if you stand too close to a lantern. It's a blend of black and white hair, giving a salt and pepper effect. But you, dear powdered listener, you know the truth. You're only just beginning your powdered journey. Next stop, the sacred ritual of powdering itself. Popular among older gentlemen, or younger ones, hoping to appear wise, it's like a wearable philosophical shrug. You slide it on, peer into the mirror. You look like you've read Voltaire, possibly twice. Stylish and considerate, a rare Georgian combination. It smells faintly of cloves and ambition. It could be the one. It's impressive, but perhaps a little aggressive for a man who cries at opera. You lean in, squinting at the little handwritten tags beneath each one. Ramillies, bagwig, full-bottomed, tie wig, Spencer, bob, so many bobs. Choosing your wig style is no idle matter. It was expensive, flammable, and wildly impractical, but dazzling in the literal sense. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine fashion or exaggerated by observers. Hootie had a little too much fortified wine. In the Georgian era, picking the wrong shape could lead to social exile, or worse, awkward small talk. You settle on the bag wig classic, just fancy enough, and mercifully not heavy enough to damage your neck cartilage. The apprentice nods approvingly and begins preparing the powdering chair. It creaks ominously, the wood worn smooth from years of powdered bottoms. You're aiming for elegance, but also subtlety. You want to say, yes, I own land, not yes, I burned down Versailles? You pick up the Ramillies style first. It's a military cut, short in the front, long at the back, and tied up in a thick queue. The full-bottomed wig is next. Now this one's a monster. A more modest option, the tie wig, draws your attention. Simple, professional, tied neatly at the sides and back. The kind of thing a barrister might wear while explaining that yes, dueling is still technically illegal. It's safe, dependable, possibly a little boring. You try it on, look in the mirror, you look employed. Congratulations. The apprentice coughs softly, drawing your attention to a smaller tray of gentlemen's casual wigs. There's the Spencer, short and sleek, popular among the more fashion-forward types. Or the bob, which, despite the name, doesn't scream middle management. Instead, it's tidy and low maintenance. The ideal choice for a gentleman with enough. It's money to be respectable, but not enough to need a valet with a powder bellows. Mainstream historical fact. By the mid-1700s, wig fashion had diversified wildly. You try on the bag wig. It's essentially a bob with a satin pouch tied over the back to keep powder from drifting onto your coat collar. But then again, the toupee wig is whispering to you. As you deliberate, the apprentice politely clears his throat. "Might I suggest something? Seasonal?" he asks, lifting a grizzle wig from its stand. A fringe tidbit. Some aristocrats had their wigs powdered with gold dust for balls and special occasions, giving off a sparkling, luminous aura under candlelight. "Back in the shop, you've made your choice." Before you sit, he offers a final warning. Do not fidget once the powdering begins. You glance again at the mirror. Your curls glisten faintly under the chandeliers. You have achieved the look of respectably absurd. Outside the shop, a carriage rattles by. Inside it, a man with a towering white wig glances out, then away, unimpressed. The chair is wider than it needs to be, and slightly reclined, part throne, part torture device. You lower yourself into it gingerly, careful not to disturb the freshly arranged curls perched on your scalp. The apprentice tightens a thin linen drape around your shoulders like a pastry chef preparing for a particularly fussy souffle. You're about to be powdered, not in a poetic fairy dust kind of way. No, this is a full frontal flower storm, engineered to make you look like a moderately wealthy ghost. The ritual begins. Others added colored chalk-soft pinks, blues, and even greens to signal particular political affiliations or flirtatious moods. There is, however, confirmed account of a certain minor baronet attending a Christmas ball with his wig powdered in red and green stripes. He was not invited back. In France, a blush-toned wig might whisper available, while in England, it might whisper poor judgment. From a nearby table, the apprentice retrieves a pair of long-handled bellows. They look like something used to stoke a forge, except the nozzle is daintier and suspiciously caked with white residue. You wiggle your toes and begin to lose all sense of time. The powder is now layered in delicate striations, giving the wig a soft matte finish. He's too professional to smile, but you sense the tiniest twinkle of pride in his eyes. The scent clings to your coat, your skin, the inside of your very lungs. There is flour in your ears, there will be flour in your pillow. You are, quite simply, part wig now. Not too chalky, not too sticky. Just the right balance of elegance and edible decor. He uses a smaller, more delicate pair of bellows for precision puffing. No, next comes the most delicate stage. Social powder room politics. Who goes first? Who brings their own brush? And most importantly, who sneezes and who pretends not to notice? He dusts your shoulders one last time, then produces a small silver mirror for inspection. You glance at your reflection. You look like the kind of person who uses the word indeed without irony. The curls frame your face perfectly. The powder glows under candlelight. You're, in short, ready for society. You're at least ready to sit very still at a dinner party. You notice he squints with one eye shut, aiming like a sniper. The powder lands perfectly. The apprentice gasps softly, immediately producing a tiny swan feather brush in a damp cloth. Clients would step inside, lean forward slightly, and receive a full-body dusting while standing on a rotating platform. A group of schoolboys walks by, one pointing at a man in a tricorn hat whose wig has clearly sagged. You feel superior. You are powdered, poised, and perfectly puffed. It was part car wash, part confession booth, and entirely ridiculous. He dabs and sweeps with surgical precision, eyes darting nervously toward the master wigmaker, who stands across the room pretending not to watch. Reputation, after all, can be undone by a single misplaced puff. You wonder how many hours he's practiced, how many wigs he's powdered, whether he ever dreams in lavender fog. A cloud of lavender and flowers surrounds you, curling around your face like a well-meaning ghost with boundary issues. You hold your breath, eyes watering. The scent wraps around you like a sleepy embrace, and even the tickle at the back of your throat becomes strangely comforting. Your hands rest in your lap. You dare not move. This is no place for sudden sneezing. Powder provided a uniform white or bluish-gray tone, helped mask unpleasant odors from the wig's oils and materials, and was believed to ward off lice, a considerable concern when your headpiece might include horsehair, human hair, and sometimes even yak. The scent was not just aesthetic. It was practical. Living in a time before regular bathing and reliable shampoo, you needed something to counterbalance the general pong of humanity. The apprentice works quickly, methodically puffing the powder into every fold and curl, using a stiff bristled brush to pat it in. Your reflection in the nearby mirror slowly vanishes in the haze. You are being erased and reborn, one puff at a time. He dips it into a wooden bowl filled with powder, a silky blend of rice starch, ground orris root, and a hint of bergamot gives it a test puff. A plume shoots out, settling gently on the counter like winter's first snowfall. You blink, your nose twitches. It's begun. The first blast hits the back of your wig, and the scent is immediately overpowering. Now for the mainstream fact, powdering wigs was considered an essential part of polite grooming in the Georgian era, particularly in court circles and among the gentry. That said, fringe practices abounded. Some people used more experimental recipes, mixing in powdered bone ash or crushed bread crusts for texture and color. Historians still argue whether these colored wigs were ever truly fashionable among the English elite, or simply a French eccentricity that British diarists exaggerated for comedic effect. Back in the chair, the apprentice has moved to your temples. You begin to relax, lulled by the soft puffs and gentle brushing. It's oddly meditative, like being dusted by a very gentle librarian. Suddenly a minor emergency. A bit of powder lands on your lapel. A fringe tidbit. Some high-end wig shops had separate powder rooms built at the back, complete with mechanical fans, domed ceilings, and even rubber floor mats to catch the fallout. Your chair doesn't rotate, but it does have a hidden footrest, which is politely extended with a quiet creak. The apprentice finishes with a flourish. And now etiquette dictates that you say something appreciative but modest. "Quite satisfactory," you murmur. The apprentice bows slightly, and you rise from the chair carefully, the way a pastry chef might lift a perfectly risen. The air is still thick with powder. Outside the shop window, the sun is higher in the sky. But the etiquette doesn't stop here. You step toward the back room, where polite warfare is waged in clouds of flour and cold judgment. The back powder room is not a room at all, it's a corridor more or less, walled in with tall smudged mirrors and faint traces of scandal. The scent of 100 perfumes lingers here, mingling with the ever-present notes of starch, old pomade, and a slightly desperate hint of citrus. A valet brushes his master's coat with quick feathered strokes, trying to dislodge the powder that's settled on the shoulders like sugar on a plum pudding. Another gentleman dabs at the corner of his eye with a lace handkerchief, muttering something about the humidity. A third stands alone, motionless, as though trying to avoid the attention of a powdered acquaintance with whom he may or may not be feuding. You step inside like a gentleman entering a chapel, soft-footed, solemn, and with a creeping awareness that someone's wig has already claimed this space before you. It's quiet, save for the occasional hiss of bellows and the cautious clearing of a throat. One 1783 pamphlet even described a gentleman's waistcoat with concealed bellows, which could release a small puff of powder at the nape of the neck with a subtle squeeze of the hip. This powder settles like a thundercloud over a nearby valet, who stifles a cough and retreats discreetly behind a curtain.
Us.
Another gentleman, watching from across the room, raises one eyebrow. There's a pause, a brief, silent judgment, and then the brushing continues. Historians still argue whether it was ever used outside of satirical sketches, but the patent was real and the ambition admirable. These powdering rooms became quiet battlegrounds of etiquette, where deference, hierarchy, and fashion sense were measured in inches of curl and grams of scented starch. Some diaries refer to them as silent theaters, while others describe them as lairs of false modesty, where gentlemen preened in secret but denied it with great pride. Out. What's certain is that power, powder, and posture became closely linked, and even a slightly askew bow could lead to whispered commentary during supper. You take your place near a mirror and pretend not to observe the intricate social ballet happening around you. You smooth your coat, adjust your cravat, there, powdered, polished, and fully composed. One nod to a familiar wigmaker, one upward glance to acknowledge a rival's slightly sagging queue. Outside, the light feels different, softer, filtered through the starch lingering on your coat. It is both armor and display. invisibly declaring your status, your attention to detail, your absolute refusal to suffer shiny temples in public, a sneeze building. Somewhere deep in your powdered lungs, a rebellion stirs. You try to suppress it, blink rapidly, look away from the mirror. It's not easy. There will be soup. There may be sweat. And somewhere a pie crust is plotting its vengeance. Pinch the bridge of your nose and think very unfunny thoughts. Stacks, ledgers, root vegetables, the length of a bishop's sermon. A discreet flick of a lace cuff to signal readiness. No words are exchanged unless absolutely necessary. You are not here to make friends. You're here to maintain your powder. Mainstream historical fact. By the late 1700s, powdering one's wig had moved from private dressing rooms to semi-public spaces, shared chambers, and theaters. Inns and ballrooms, often attached to cloakrooms or gentlemen's lounges. One such powdered space existed at Almack's Assembly Rooms, London's most exclusive social club. A man's social success could hinge on how gracefully he emerged from the powder chamber fully composed. Appropriately matte and not resembling a disgruntled snowman. Turn slightly to face the mirror, and here begins the delicate part. Touching up. Sympathetic valet moves to assist, but the damage is done. The waistcoat now bears a perfect triangle of starch, as though it lost a duel with a scone. You pretend not to notice, but inwardly, you give thanks to every powdered deity that your own touch-up remains unblemished. The powder has settled nicely, but you notice a slight sheen around the temple area. You draw out a small personal puff carried for emergencies like this, and tap gently at the sides. Just enough to blur the shine, not enough to clump. Powdering too heavily in company could be interpreted as insecurity. Too lightly, and one risks looking like a gambler worse, a poet. A fringe tidbit. Men often carried discreet powdering tools in their coat pockets, a soft puff made of rabbit fur, or a folding spoon for applying powder to tricky areas. To your right, a man in a particularly wide, full-bottomed wig attempts to bow while adjusting his side curls. It doesn't go well. In this powdered ecosystem, eye contact is brief but strategic. Just as you think you've survived without incident, you feel it. The feeling passes. You exhale in relief and dab once more at your neckline. The powder has held. You are intact. One gentleman, likely a first-timer, fumbles his pocket puff and spills powder down the front of his embroidered waistcoat. Historians still argue whether these powdered rooms operated more like parlors or performance spaces. One last glance in the mirror. You tilt your head just slightly to one side. Yes, the curls catch the light at just the right angle. You turn, nod politely to the others in the chamber, and exit the room with slow, silent steps. And now, powdered and poised, you must take on the next trial of Georgian etiquette. Eating, drinking, and not ruining your wig in the process. You're seated now at a long, groaning Georgian supper table, hemmed in by the rustle of silk. The occasional whiff of powdered rosemary and the low murmur of conversation filtered through at least 2 centuries of social anxiety. Reach carefully for your spoon, not the large one that's for syllabub. You take the smaller, flatter one, and angle your wrist just so. The soup is not too runny, not too thick. Good. You lower your head slightly, not too far. Bring the spoon to your lips. Sip without so much as a rustle of lace. Victory. 1 spoon down, only 30 more to go. But written accounts from Georgian letter writers do reference wig powder melting under candle heat and soup vapor, suggesting that supper-time wig management was a real and present concern. If you've ever sat next to a fondue pot while wearing a full can of dry shampoo, you may begin to understand. You smile politely, lift it discreetly, and without looking dab at your nape. It's not perfect, but it'll hold. Curl size back into place. Crisis, for now, averted. Candles flicker in their silver sconces. Someone has dropped a serving spoon into a tureen. Soup splashes upward in a graceful arc. You tense. So do several wigs. He blinks rapidly, producing a handkerchief and dabbing at his cheek like a man trying to remove scandal. You pretend not to see it, you all do, and to subtly indicate their desire not to be disturbed like a powdered "do not disturb" sign. In some circles, these became fashion statements in their own right, embroidered with small symbols or quotes in silver thread. One surviving veil bears the phrase "whisper" or "eat alone." The unusual health of someone's greyhound dew. Feel your wig settling once more, secure and serene. In powdered society, one never witnesses soup. The most dangerous of liquids. You sip gently, holding the stem as if it might explode. There will be dancing. Wherever there is dancing, there is sweat. And wherever there is sweat, there is powdered disobedience across the table. Someone laughs too hard and coughs into their sleeve. You flinch instinctively, shielding your wig like a powdered tortoise. She has just finished a delicate spoonful of aspic, and now fans herself gently with a pearl-handled device. Her wig, a towering confection of powdered rolls and tiny paper roses, quivers slightly as she breathes. You notice she wears a protective netting, so fine, it's barely visible over the top of her wig. Preventative measure against crumbs. Clever. A curl has shifted. Subtle. Just a slight tilt inward toward your collar, but enough to throw off the sacred geometry of your look. You fight the urge to reach up, but that would be vulgar. Instead, you wait for the footman to pass, and very casually whisper, "Powder brush, please." The table is heavy with delicacies, jellied eels, stewed fruits, game birds glazed within an inch of their lives, and you are faced with the most precarious of modern terrors in powdered times. The threat of gravy meeting wig, your powdered curls perch just so above your collar, but each motion of the jaw or tilt of the head threatens to dislodge the delicate symmetry of your coiffure. Mainstream fact, Georgian formal meals were lengthy affairs, often running to 2 or 3. Courses each containing a dizzying variety of dishes. Pies, pickled items, sweets, and side dishes that could veer wildly from truffled pigeon to almond jelly in the same course. The side curls brush softly against your cheeks every time you turn your head. One particularly fastidious earl even commissioned a wig with a removable top section, which could be unclipped and stored in a velvet-lined box during pudding, then reattached before cards. Think of it as the powdered equivalent of taking off your hat at the table, except more powdered, more expensive, and with significantly more risk of misalignment. They are whispering in their own flowery language. Careful now, and you chew. Slowly, deliberately. Not just to avoid ruining your powder, but because you're seated next to Lady Devereux, who has a reputation for cataloging every lapse of manners in her diary. If even one powder fleck falls into your syllabub, it will be reported. These were consumed in order so much as in orbit. Guests navigated the table as much by instinct as instruction, all while balancing decorum and powdered dignity. Your wig, of course, isn't helping. Fringe tidbit. Some dinner guests wore specialized dining wigs, lighter, less elaborate versions of their usual coiffure, designed to withstand the indignities of soup, steam, and pie crumbs. Historians still argue whether such dining wigs were ever truly common, or just a convenience for the overly wealthy and spectacularly paranoid. Back at your seat, you feel a sudden drop in temperature, a ghostly breeze across the back of your neck. You glance down. Disaster. He nods and returns a moment later with the tiniest brush you've ever seen, more wand than broom, resting on a silver tray like a sacrament. There's a clang from the far end of the table. A man in a rather ambitious judge's wig emerges, slightly moistened but unbowed. A footman sweeps in to adjust his chair, replace his napkin, and offer a backup cravat. The rest of the table resumes chewing. You shift in your seat and lean slightly toward Lady Devereux. Another mainstream detail. Some upper-class women wore lace or silk wig veils. During meals, to preserve styling, you reach for your wine glass. Red, of course. It's red. Dessert arrives, jellied pears, sugar-crusted almonds, candied violets. You allow yourself a breath, less gravy, fewer threats, a safer course. And as the final course dwindles and conversation drifts into more relaxed territory, cards, whether you made it. The evening is not yet over, of course. The ballroom awaits like a perfumed trap. You step inside and immediately feel the temperature shift warmer, heavier, as if the chandeliers themselves are exhaling. The scent is a soft riot of orange blossom water, beeswax, powdered iris root, and the faintest whiff of desperate hope. Candlelight winks off every mirrored sconce, and the effect is something between a celestial sphere and a very polite furnace. Already gentlemen are removing their gloves. A string quartet tunes lazily in the corner, as if time is optional and powder eternal. You're not here to marry, of course. You're here to glide, to nod, to survive a minuet without sweating directly through your powdered scalp, still coiled. And now comes the test, your first bow of the night. You find your partner, a lady of no fewer than 3 ostrich feathers towering from her coiffure like an elegant threat. She gives you a measured smile. You return one just as faint. Then, with all the gravity of an astronomer measuring orbits, you bow. You turn, she turns, and you momentarily catch sight of your reflection in the mirrored wall. We're briefed by your valet and practiced once in your slippers, alone in the drawing room. But still, the instincts are there. Move gracefully. Hold your neck tall. Do not under any circumstances laugh too hard. Laughter shakes the wig. Laughter releases the powder. The curls hold. The powder holds. Your forehead has begun to glisten just barely, but there's no streaking yet. You've circled once, now again, and suddenly the tempo shifts. To abandon the pattern was to disrupt the harmony. And harmony in powdered circles was everything. A country dance this time, more vigorous, more boisterous. You are led into a reel. You hesitate. This wasn't in the powder plan, but your partner smiles, a little too brightly, and you oblige. The room is vast, echoing slightly underfoot as satin slippers scuff and settle. Men bowed from the waist, one foot behind the other, keeping the back straight and the eyes modestly lowered. Wigs were not to shift, slide, or wobble during this moment. The sweat will rise. The curls will slip. And someone, somewhere, will want to talk politics. Others hint at roaming powder maids hired by the wealthiest families to carry portable puffs and brushes. A breeze, faint and miraculous, drifts from an open window. You angle yourself toward it like a sunflower. The cool air finds your collar, and for a moment you feel human again. But most guests, it seems, simply bore it. Powdered and proud, they let the heat have them, and relied on posture alone to hold everything aloft. You fan yourself with a program. A footman discreetly offers a cool cloth. You dab at your temples with the practiced grace of a man who knows this ISNT over. A curl threatens to leap free near your ear, but you tighten your jaw and keep dancing. Perhaps no one noticed, but it's tilting. Slowly. Like a galleon in rough seas. You nod as you pass. He nods back a little too briskly and his wig shifts another degree. You know, as you both know. You bow gently, deliberately, and retreat to the edge of the floor. But in the sacred code of the ballroom, you say nothing. You let the ship sink in peace. You are wrong. The minuet is not just a dance. It is a powdered duel. Every step, every turn, every gentle gesture is a chance for social triumph or ruin. The ideal bow is less about humility and more about control. An unbalanced reverence could doom your social standing for weeks. You adjust your posture. Wig. Still in place? Curls. Your partner curtsies, and the dance begins. A mainstream historical fact. Georgian ballroom etiquette demanded a precise form of bowing the reverence. Yours goes well only. The smallest puff of powder drifts from your shoulder, caught briefly in a shaft of candlelight like a wandering moth. Others stitched hidden ribbons under the chin, artfully concealed by lace cravats or chokers. One bold duchess reportedly used fish glue to anchor her towering periwig before a royal ball. The results were immobile, but she did faint halfway through the quadrille. Historians still argue whether it was the glue or the gossip that did her in. Now about the dancing. You think perhaps that it will be simple? Fringe tidbit? Some wig wearers inserted tiny lead weights into their curls to keep them in place during dances. You move now in a slow circuit, arm extended, hand gently grazing your partners in rhythm with the strings. This is what you trained for. Well, not trained, precisely. The dance continues. Sweat begins at the nape of your neck, the most treacherous location. You hope the powder there was extra fine. You whirl spin, bow again. You pass by another gentleman mid-dance. His wig is a marvel silvered, curled, towering. Mainstream etiquette dictated that dancers must never leave the floor mid-set, no matter what befell them: twisted ankle, dropped glove, or collapsing coiffure. You pivot once more, slower now. The quartet eases into its final notes. The dance concludes. You did it. Your wig miracle of starch and nerve has survived. Because now, yes, comes the greatest peril of all. The intermission. That strange in-between where one must stand, converse, sip, and remain utterly composed. While your powdered self slowly begins to betray you, historians still argue about the practicality of wig maintenance during these intermissions. Some accounts suggest quick touch-ups behind velvet curtains. You find a place near the edge of the room. But don't get too comfortable. There's still dessert. There's still cards. There's always gossip. You've survived the dance floor with most of your dignity. Your wig intact. Well done. But now comes a different sort of duel, just as powdered and twice as cunning. The drawing room. You find yourself ushered into a chamber perfumed with lavender sachets, polished rosewood, and the faint hum of conversational sabotage. Here, social survival is no longer measured in precise dance steps or correctly held wine glasses. A fire crackles softly. It's July. No one dares question it. It's measured in glances, gossip, and how convincingly you can sip tea without flinching at the heat. Courtships began here, reputations were made or unmade, and the informal ranking of who was recalibrated nightly based on posture, powder, and punchline. Someone else jokes about powdered wigs going flat in the rain. His presence is announced by a trailing cloud of violet-scented powder and the echo of a cane thumping with theatrical precision. Or are we simply indulging in ancient starch addiction? You chuckle too, but lightly, because this is a trap. Certain pamphleteers and fashion satirists mocked the wig delete, accusing them of vanity, excess, and in one memorable broadside, hiding their thoughts behind fluffed fictions. This growing disdain would eventually help usher in the more natural hairstyles of the Regency era. But for now, the powder held strong barely. He is one of those men who wears his wig like armor immense, symmetrical, intimidating. Two tight rows of side curls frame his jowls like angry parentheses. The laughter increases. You smile with the practiced warmth of someone who's heard that joke 3 times this week and once in Latin. Surviving wigs from the era what little remain show impressive craftsmanship, with wefts and wire supports designed to endure at least a moderate jostling. But it's clear from letters, journals, and the ever-vital etiquette guides that perception of wig perfection was just as important as reality. Lady Devereux sidles up beside you again. Her wig is still flawless. How you do not know, and she offers you a candied ginger slice without breaking eye contact. A powdered head that looked fresh conferred just as much power as one that was. You're not much of a card shark, but you are good at looking interested, while remembering none of the rules. This is a useful skill, especially when partnered with someone who takes games seriously, like Lord Biddlesworth. I suspect, my lord, that wigs remain popular because they prevent real hair from being mistaken for common thoughts. You notice a small pile forming near the velvet of the card table, as if it's snowing starch. You play a 2 of hearts. Biddlesworth grunts. You smile vaguely, as if to say, strategy. You take it gently pinky at the proper angle, of course. Bring it to your lips. It's hot. Too hot. Your first instinct is to wince. But no. You are a powdered warrior. You sip calmly. Not just because it was unsightly, but because stray powder could settle on the cards, making them easier to mark or read. Cheating by powder wasn't exactly common, but it was suspected especially in tight aristocratic circles where fortunes were sometimes lost over pudding. The room's humidity has begun to swell. You sense your side ringlets absorbing moisture like bread left out in the rain. The curls tug ever so gently at your temples like a sleepy child pulling your sleeve. You bow your head just a little and a small flurry of powder escapes like a sigh. Hard to tell, but you're not here for art, you're here for air. No collapse yet, but we're approaching a state of imminent lilt. Only one eyebrow arches, and just a bit. Flawless. Etiquette was paramount, but so was charm. You had to sparkle just not enough to sweat. Some read poetry aloud. Others fan themselves in slow unison, and a few begin the most dangerous activity of all. Casual conversation. The room is plush and dimly lit, as if the curtains themselves are trying to muffle any emotional outbursts. Round you, men and women in varying states of powdered perfection gather on tufted sofas. Mainstream fact, Georgian drawing rooms were not just places to relax, they were strategic arenas. You spot a teacup, bless porcelain. Someone begins a tale about a relative's misadventure in Bath. The room titters in appreciation. You contribute a polite nod. Then, from across the room, the true menace arrives. Lord Biddlesworth. He leans in, addressing the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I put to you, is there any point to wigs anymore? The room chuckles. Fringe tidbit. Some anti-wig sentiment began surfacing even in the late Georgian period. Back in the room, Lady Forsyth offers a sharp retort to Lord Biddlesworth's jab. The room erupts. Lightly. Politely. It's a Georgian eruption, mostly a gust of laughter and the sound of someone setting down a teacup too quickly.
Ow.
You take the opportunity to reposition your curls ever so slightly. You wander subtly toward the window, pretending to admire a portrait. It's of someone long dead and stiffly dressed, possibly with a taxidermied spaniel. Historians still argue whether powdered wigs were truly as delicate as memoirs suggest, or whether modern recreations exaggerate their fragility. Someone near the hearth sneezes. A puff of powder floats gently into the air. You pretend not to notice. In your hand, the tea has cooled. You sip more freely now, grateful for the excuse to lower your gaze and rest your neck. You accept. It's sweet and oddly comforting. Your curls loosen a fraction. It's all right, we're among powdered friends. Now someone has brought out cards. Whist. The great equalizer. The cards are dealt. Powder drifts from the sleeves of every player. Quick mainstream detail here. Powder etiquette demanded that players avoid brushing their wigs or adjusting their hair mid-game. You win a hand, mostly by accident. Someone claps politely. The game ends. Your partner thanks you with a smile that suggests both mild gratitude and low expectations. The fire crackles louder now. People yawn, then apologize for yawning. You feel it too. The day is long. The powder is heavier than you expected. And just as you consider retreating to the cloakroom, a servant appears with a tray of tiny ices. You do not run, but you make your way toward the ices with the urgency of a man whose wig is one sneeze away from collapse. The servant holding the silver tray looks vaguely amused, as though he's seen this procession 100 times tonight already. Sharp, cold, clean, a powder cleansing sorbet for the soul, which he has. Because these is served in delicate porcelain cups chilled over salt and snow are not merely a treat, they're salvation. Cold reaches the inside of your mouth, radiating gently to the back of your throat, and up into the depths of your head. There's a hint of elderflower in the strawberry. I swear, says another. You nod along, feigning intense flavor analysis while trying to estimate, purely by scalp sensation, whether your wig is still holding its center curl. These human-powered cooling systems were a staple at summer gatherings. And it was in tea, unheard of, for entire events to be planned around the direction of prevailing breezes, where a thin ribbon of heat has been pressing against your powdered scalp for the past 3 hours. You feel yourself cool from the inside out. Somewhere behind you, a door creaks. You hear the clink of a fresh punch bowl being set down. Lord Biddlesworth has mercifully retired. A replacement arrives in the form of Miss Catriona Bellwether, a woman known for her conversational agility and unreasonably stable hair. A second wind, in more ways than one. You choose lemon, always lemon. Or maybe you're simply embracing the absurdity of it, all the wig. The powder. The endless unspoken rules that dictate which direction your eyebrows may rise in polite company. Their preparation required elaborate ice houses, imported sugar, and an unfortunate number of kitchen servants rotating barrels. The upper crust used them not only for refreshment, but for social signaling. You could afford to serve a dozen flavors midsummer. You could afford almost anything. The first bite makes your eyelids flutter. Not from pleasure, though yes, it is pleasant, but from relief. Mainstream historical fact. Georgian ices, also known as iced creams, were luxury confections often reserved for special occasions. The last thing you need now is a wig quake caused by sudden mirth. A sort of elegant nasal chuckle, called the polite breath, became fashionable among ladies, and was often practiced in mirrors. Men, not to be outdone, cultivated their own restrained guffaws, involving mostly shoulder movements and no actual sound. Some suggest they served as a social befora, a place where conversation could occur without needing to look directly at someone's eyes. Others believe they were a way to observe others' patience, wit, and powder endurance without direct confrontation. Servants passed through with second rounds of punch, now diluted slightly to avoid any scandalous overindulgence. Someone plays a harpsichord in the next room. The chords drift in soft and clumsy, which is just right. Round you murmured, compliments drift lazily between sips. Is this rosewater? Someone gasps. You respond with something vague about socio-political resonance and clever use of lamps. Your conversation partner nods in agreement. Neither of you has seen the play. You're not alone. Around the room, you observe the signs of powdered fatigue. Every person a powdered piece on a game board too large to see in full. The key is to glide, not to win. A gentleman's side ringlets have wilted inward like soggy pretzels. A young debutante is quietly fluffing her father's periwig with the corner of her fan. The Grand Duchess, remember her, the one with the peacock pin. A curl near your left temple has unfurled just slightly, like a sleeping cat's tail. There's a faint line of powder dust at your collar. And the center peak well, it's beginning to list ever so gently to the east. It's slightly damp. A minor scandal, you'll survive, is now seated near the fire, her curls visibly steaming in the hearth's glow. You hope she'll make it. Fringe tidbit. In particularly humid seasons, guests were known to station themselves near open windows or under ceiling fans spun by servants with pulleys in, exhausting. Job referred to in some diaries as the powder breeze. A light breeze touches your cheek now. Sash window has been opened wider. You stroll toward the card table again where new players are gathering. Someone is laying out a fresh deck ivory backed, with tiny illustrations of hunting dogs. You nod to her. She nods back. Her curls do not move. The game begins again. It's time you're more present. Perhaps it's the lemon ice. Perhaps it's the cooler air. You play a jack. Miss Bellwether counters with an ace. You smile. She smiles. Your curls, for now, are behaving. Historians still argue whether these late-evening drawing room games were more about amusement or performance. You lean back, allowing your fingers to rest lightly on the edge of the table. You observe not the game, but the rhythm of the room. There's Lady Forsyth, deep in a low-stakes wager over which opera singer will faint on stage next week. There's the vicar, trying to explain dominoes to a group of very polite women who have no intention of learning. There's a small boy, possibly a cousin of someone important, snatching a powdered muffin and immediately regretting it as he coughs a cloud of flour into a candelabra. You suppress a laugh. Just in time. Fringe detail. Some Georgian socialites learn to regulate their laughter specifically to preserve their hairstyles. You try one now, mid-card game. It feels awful, but effective. As the evening stretches on, the pace slows. You're asked about your thoughts on a new play debuting in Covent Garden. This is the rhythm of late Georgian social life, not even comfort, but harmony. You rise from the table, give a brief bow to Miss Bellwether, and take a moment to adjust your cravat. You pass by a mirror again. This time you dare to look. It's not perfect. But somehow, you've never looked more Georgian. You ease away from the card table with the grace of a powdered noble, who has officially reached their conversational quota for the evening. The soft chime of porcelain teacups being gathered by servants drifts behind you. And you give a polite nod to no one in particular, an old trick for exiting a drawing room unnoticed. Down a corridor lined with foxed mirrors and gilt-framed etchings of dramatically wind-swept battlefields, you find your next destination. The refreshment parlor. Not because you need more refreshments. The refreshment parlor is sometimes a conservatory. Sometimes just the less formal end of a salon served as a transitional space. Guests came here to nibble, sip, and discreetly deflate after hours of public perfection. The lighting was dimmer, the etiquette relaxed, and conversation grew dare, we say almost sincere. But because this is where the true theatrics often unfold, where guests unlace their social corsets, just a smidge. Inside, candles flicker low in mirrored sconces, casting elongated shadows that make every wig look about 6 inches taller and faintly menacing. No, this is a full-blown debate, sparked by a woman in a seafoam green gown and a rather adventurous coiffure that resembles a frosted cake left out in a breeze. The air is slightly cooler here thanks to strategically opened doors and the quiet swirl of servants walking with trays held high like parade floats. Forget what real hair feels like. You ride it out, swirling your cordial like a tiny whirlpool of boredom. Mainstream fact. By the late 18th century, his Georgian houses had developed specialized rooms for nearly every stage of an evening. This natural trend was often ridiculed both by wigmakers and the general public. Satirical prints depicted these brave souls as bald revolutionaries or heads without secrets. Some aristocrats began commissioning partial wigs or powdering only select areas of their real hair to give the illusion of fullness while retaining scalp sensation. Bold choices, all. You spot Lord Bittlesworth again, now visibly drowsy, blinking slowly at a biscuit as if waiting for it to speak. Others are whispering about upcoming garden fetes, and who may or may not have had their wig powdered with crushed lilacs last weekend. You spot a low buffet table with preserved fruits, and one lone dish of something attempting to be blancmange. You respond with a carefully vague answer about one's valet being very thorough, while offering a half-smile that can be interpreted as either humility or concealed scandal. But you watch him do it anyway, fingers disappearing just under the curled edge like a hand slipping into a well. She approves. The way your scalp begins to hum with low, static fatigue. It's not just the wig, it's the night. It's the strange mental gymnastics of performing relaxation while being alert to every social cue, every lilt in speech, every quiver of an eyebrow that might indicate offense, flirtation, or sleepiness. One gentleman defends the powdered wig as the last bastion of civilization. Without wigs, we are but Frenchmen, he declares, somewhat unfairly. Another suggests wigs are oppressive to the scalp. Curling into a carriage seat, letting your curls collapse in peace. A dream. While etiquette books emphasized cleanliness, scent, and appearance, they rarely required wigs outright. But norms are powerful. In many circles, attending an event bareheaded was viewed as either eccentric or, worse, radical. A third posits, dramatically, that in the end, the wigs wear us. "Tell me," she says, voice low, "do you powder yourself? Or is it done by ... professionals?" You wisely avoid it. Instead, you pour a small cordial, the syrupy kind that coats your teeth and has the approximate viscosity of tree sap. It's both soothing and mildly alarming, just like the evening.
Ow.
Then comes the hush. Every gathering has it. That sudden dip in chatter as if the room has taken one collective breath and docentee quite know what to say next. And then just when silence begins to settle in for the night, someone brings up wigs. Not in passing. Not a half-joke or a mumbled grumble about humidity. "I do wonder," she says, "whether our obsession with wigs has made us." The room inhales. Fringe tidbit. A small but vocal segment of the Georgian elite experimented with wearing their own hair teased, powdered and styled into wig-like shapes. Back in the parlor, you pretend to inspect a dish of chestnuts while eavesdropping shamelessly. The conversation has become passionate. You stifle a chuckle, almost. Historians still argue whether wig-wearing was truly mandatory for social survival or simply a deeply entrenched cultural habit. You're approached by a lady whose powdered tower leans delicately forward, as if eavesdropping along with her. Ah, the sacred question. A Georgian litmus test. You sip your cordial, now room temperature, and observe the slow choreography of the room. People rotate conversational partners like dancers switching steps. A few drift toward the exits. Act. Some guests are fluffing their curls with lace handkerchiefs, pretending not to be checking their own humidity damage. And there, by the half-closed door, a young man reaches up to scratch beneath his periwig. A risky move. Too bold, really, he sighs. He does not regret it. You feel it too, that ache beneath the powder. You glance toward the door, and for the first time, you imagine slipping away. Not dramatically, not in shame, just exiting quietly, but not quite yet. Because someone near the window is telling a story about a man who wore the same powdered wig for 17 years and only refreshed it with lavender starch once a season. You lean against the edge of a window alcove, your cordial nearly forgotten in your hand. As the story of the 17-year wig unfolds like an epic poem in powdered iambic pentameter, the storyteller a rotund gentleman with a theatrical lisp and cheeks that shine just a touch too much in the million. Candlelight spins his tale with conviction. 17 years, he repeats for emphasis, eyes wide as saucers. And he said that the trick was daily brushing and the avoidance of unnecessary emotion. You nod solemnly as though this advice might change your life. Gentlemen of lesser means would often stretch their wig's lifespan with creative patching, powder layering, and the occasional discreet comb-over of frizzed sections. Mainstream historical fact. While not quite the norm, it was possible for a well-constructed peruke, particularly those made of human hair, and reinforced with sturdy wefts to last for decades with diligent care. The fire has died low, and the golden light flickers more on people's wigs than on their faces. Would it last 17 years? Unlikely. But perhaps it might see you through the remainder of this week's engagements, provided you avoid rain, spontaneous dancing, and political arguments. You can't see much, only the faint outline of hedges. A distant flicker of torchlight, but the cool air nudging through the cracks in the glass feels almost divine. This unfortunately made wigs both fragrant and delicious to household pests. Had to wear a hat for weeks, he adds with a raspy chuckle. The hat was worse. There are several recorded cases of rats attempting to chew through wig boxes, and one memorable diary entry describing a wig eaten through by night with only the lace remaining.
Oh.
Some argue they provided the rarest currency of all, honesty under the guise of powder and pleasantries. Others insist they were merely the final fluttering gasp of formality, where even vulnerability had to be powdered first. You now picture your own periwig, that faithful creature currently clinging to your head like a powdered marsupial. The room has softened again. Most guests have returned to their seats, murmuring in pairs or trios. A servant silently replaces an extinguished candle. He begins to tell you about the first time he powdered his own father's wig. Back in 1732, we used flour, he says proudly. Not starch, not then. Flour. From the kitchen. Got ants. Take a seat beside an elderly baronet whose wig has clearly slipped an inch backward without his noticing. You no longer sit with the perfect rigidity demanded earlier in the evening. Your spine has softened. Your chin rests lightly on a curled knuckle at your wigwell. It's still there, hanging on like the last leaf in a stiff breeze. It's the closest you'll get to freedom tonight, that future generations will let their hair grow wild and unshaped. A few others follow, coats shrugged on, fans folded, farewells whispered with the weariness of candle wax. You do not move, not yet, fringe tidbit. Its true flour was commonly used in early wig powder mixtures, often mixed with chalk or ground orris root. You murmur a sound of commiseration and resist the urge to reach up and check your own curls for chew marks. Outside the tall sash windows, the night is settling into that velvety stage of darkness, where the sky loses color but gains depth. There's only the sound of liquid being poured, of lace sleeves brushing fabric, of fire coals settling into themselves. The baronet continues, telling you about a cousin who once attempted to dye his wig with boiled walnut husks and ended up with something that looked like spoiled marmalade. You glance around and you notice it, the slowly unfolding unraveling of the evening. Historians still argue whether these late-night wig salons, unofficial, quiet, and often semi-private, were more valuable than the grand balls and stately suppers themselves. When you open them again, the room looks almost unfamiliar, like a memory you haven't had yet. They'll pore over the handwriting, debate whether the word is cordial or choral, and wonder what it was really like to sit in a Georgian parlor, powdered and half-dreaming, sipping bitter tea at midnight. You're not sure who's right, but it's in this softened hour when servants move slower, and candles burn shorter, that secrets tend to tumble. A lady beside the hearth admits she sometimes powders her dog's ears. Just lightly, she insists. He enjoys the ritual. A gentleman confesses. He's gone an entire season with the same powder puff and blames it for his string of bad luck at cards. Someone else who might be the Duchess's footman in disguise. Judging by the glint of rebellion in his eye, declares that one day wigs will vanish altogether. There is laughter, nervous, delighted, a little scandalized. You find yourself speaking up. And what will they do when it rains? A moment of silence and then more laughter. Genuine this time. Warm, if still exhausted. You adjust your posture. You wonder briefly what it might feel like to take it off. Right now, in this room, with these people. And then you remember. This is the refreshment parlor, not the revolution. Instead, you reach for a small square of lemon-scented cloth provided. Ironically, to dab fingertips between courses and gently pat behind your ears. Someone rises to go. There's still one final pot of tea being served lukewarm, possibly oversteeped, but offered with a weary smile. You accept a cup. Its warmth pools in your palm, and for the first time all evening, no one is speaking. You sip. It is dreadful, but somehow, it is exactly what you wanted. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, not quite, but to wrest your vision from the patterns of silk and brocade. Perhaps in some dusty future archive, a historian will find a letter from a guest who attended this very evening. They won't get it quite right, but you will remember. You finally rise from the sunken settee with all the cautious reverence of someone balancing. It's not just a delicate teacup, but a powdered wig that's beginning to tilt leftward with each heartbeat. The room is nearly emptied now, just a handful of silhouettes in far corners, conversing so quietly their words float rather than fall. The air has changed, not cooler exactly, but less managed. As if the effort of orchestrated charm has quietly packed its bags and headed off to bed, leaving behind something looser, truer. You step into the corridor once more, your footsteps muffled by a runner of worn velvet that must have heard 1,000 powdered confessions. There is a mirror to your left. You glance and are greeted by a stranger in cream and curls, someone you half know. Your cheeks are flushed, your curls are slightly drooping, and there is a streak of powder just under your ear that gives you the look of someone who attempted fencing with a bag of flour. Mainstream fact. By the mid-Georgian period, it was not unusual for guests to remain at social gatherings well past midnight, especially in grand houses with ample staff. Though formal events had set etiquette hours, the aftermath, when slippers were exchanged for soft shoes and wigs were tugged gently from aching scalps, was its own kind of ritual. The after-social phase allowed for less performative versions of conversation and appearance. You pass through a smaller chamber filled with chairs stacked in lopsided clusters and shawls draped over furniture like ghosts resting. In the center of the room, you spot a small folding screen, gilded with a pastoral scene of sheep who look suspiciously smug. Behind the screen, someone giggles. Then a voice. Careful, it'll slip right off if you tug there. The age-old dance of wig removal is in full swing. Fringe tidbit. In many Georgian homes, guests would retire to semi-private powdering closets or dressing rooms to discreetly remove their wigs before sleeping or, on long evenings, simply to let their scalp breathe. Some houses even had custom padded wig stands shaped like human heads, often whimsically painted so guests could rest their wigs in style. You inch closer, feigning interest in a nearby table of discarded fans. The screen rustles. A white powdered hand appears, delicately holding a wig that resembles a pastry after a minor earthquake. I think it's actually itching me on purpose now, comes the voice again, Moko Kusing. You hear someone else shush her, the tone more amused than stern. Historians still argue whether wig discomfort was exaggerated in period writings or truly as relentless as memoirs suggest. Some claim that padding, powder, and silk linings provided adequate protection from irritation. Others believe the constant weight, heat, and residue buildup contributed to headaches, scalp infections, and what one 18th century writer dramatically called the madness of the crown. You nod silently at this phrase. The madness of the crown? Seems about right. You continue onward, guided now by instinct more than intention. Past a pair of closed doors, beyond the scent of melting beeswax, and something that might once have been lavender. And into a narrower passage, where the walls feel closer and the tapestries more muted in tone. There you find it, a guest retiring room. Not a bedroom, no. This isn't that kind of gathering. But a space outfitted with soft seating, low light, and the unspoken understanding that wigs are optional here. A young footman nods to you as you enter. He's folding linen squares, some clearly used, others crisp and scented. In the corner, a small table holds wig pins, combs, and even a bowl of lemon water for those daring enough to distick their temples. You sit, slowly, carefully, and at long last you reach up. There's a pause, the kind that stretches across centuries, the kind shared by every powdered head that has ever wondered. Is now the moment? Removing this tangled monument release me, or undo me? You decide to find out. Your fingers hook under the edge of your periwig, tug gently, and it lifts. Heavier than expected, warm from your skin, slightly damp where effort met ambition. You place it on a padded stand shaped like a cherub's head. The cherub looks smug. You exhale. Your scalp tingles, cool air moving through hair that hasn't seen freedom since mid-afternoon. You tilt your head side to side, the muscles responding like a cat just released from a bonnet. Nearby, a woman hums as she unpins curls from her temple. A man stretches, arching his neck with the slow gratitude of someone rediscovering vertebrae. A servant enters quietly with a silver tray of lavender water and dear Merzies, small towels warmed by the hearth. You dip one and press it behind your ears. Bliss. You realize, not for the first time, that the grandeur of Georgian society rests upon a delicate lie, that everyone feels comfortable, that towering wigs and powdered calves and rigid posture are all just natural, effortless expressions of taste. But you've seen the truth now, in flickering light and half-whispered sighs. Everyone itches, everyone aches, everyone yearns to take the weight off. Still, they wear it anyway. Because in this world, this powdered, perfumed world appearances aren't just part of the ritual. They are the ritual. Smile softly, letting the towel rest across your shoulders. Someone's quietly playing a harpsichord in a nearby room, only a few notes at a time, probably testing the strings. But the sound is soft and oddly calming. You close your eyes. The scent of lavender and lemon mingles in the air. You no longer hear voices, only fabric rustling, water trickling into basins, the final movements of people who've been performing all night and are finally, mercifully, off stage. For now, because tomorrow when the sun returns and the wigs are repowdered, restyled, repinned, this will all begin again. But not yet. Now you rest. Somewhere between the hush of velvet slippers on tile and the gentle creak of a chair that's been sat in for far too long, you find yourself drawn down a narrow hallway, one that feels quieter than the rest is, if the house itself is holding its breath. You're not entirely sure how you ended up here, but you suspect the lavender water helped. The wig stand is behind you now, your scalp finally cool and blessedly unburdened. There's a peculiar lightness to your step, as though each footfall is less of a weight and more of a suggestion. The corridor opens into a small, unremarkable chamber, lit only by a single wall sconce and an oil lamp placed on a writing desk. On the desk sits a stack of letters tied with blue ribbon, and beside it a rather splendid silver comb engraved with the initials FR, which likely belonged to someone far more important than you. Still, you pick it up, just to feel the weight of it. Mainstream historical fact. Personal grooming tools were often status symbols in the Georgian era. Wealthy individuals frequently commissioned combs, brushes, and powder puffs with personalized engravings or made from exotic materials, tortoiseshell, ivory, even silver. These kits weren't just practical, they were portable proofs of refinement, often carried from estate to estate like miniature declarations of taste. You set the comb down and take a seat in the window bay. Outside, the moon is a perfect slice of pewter behind drifting clouds. A breeze lifts the edge of the curtain, and you smell something faintly earthly wet leaves, perhaps, or soil disturbed by midnight gardeners. If such people exist. You remember a conversation from earlier in the evening, something about whether wig powder should have scent. The opinions had been divided. One guest swore by orris root, another insisted that rosemary powder deterred moths and unflattering gossip. A third, in a rare show of vulnerability, admitted to using cinnamon once. They followed me, he said gravely. All the wasps. You smile at the memory, because you almost believe it. Fringe tidbit. It wasn't uncommon for scented powders to attract insects. While many powders were deliberately perfumed to mask less desirable odors, the inclusion of botanicals like rose petal dust, orange peel, or lavender could invite curious bezoar, worse moths looking for their next hairpiece nesting spot. You shiver, more from the idea than the breeze. In your lap rests a small book someone has left behind. Spine is cracked, the page is dog-eared. It's a manual of etiquette from 1745, clearly meant for debutantes and socially anxious viscounts. You flip it open, there on the page. When bowing to a lady whilst wearing the full peruke, be mindful of wind and wax. A dislodged curl may land you in gossip. You chuckle softly, imagining the potential scandal of airborne curls. You can practically hear the whispers. Did you see it? Right into the lemonade? You turn another page. Never powder your wig in company unless invited to do so. Should your host provide powder, it is polite to compliment the texture, even if clumpy. You close the book. Enough wisdom for one night. Historians still argue whether etiquette manuals of the period were truly followed, or merely aspirational guides for a kind of behavior that only existed in theory. Some scholars believe these texts reflect a desperate bid to contain the social chaos of rapidly changing fashions. Others suggest they were satirical to begin with, passed around more for amusement than instruction. You suspect the truth lies somewhere between. After all, who hasn't pretended to know which fork to use? You rise and begin walking again back down the corridor. Right. This time you pass a powdering room with the door half open. Inside, two women sit facing each other on tufted stools. One gently combs through the other's curls with slow, rhythmic strokes, as if soothing a child or brushing away time itself. No one speaks. You don't interrupt. You make your way downstairs, guided now by instinct and the lingering scent of candle smoke. In the entrance hall, a man is sleepily arguing with his valet about whether his walking stick is the one with the ivory parrot or the mahogany dog's head. It's clearly a parrot, the valet says, deadpan. I own no parrots, the man replies with faint outrage, before sneezing powder into his own cravat. You slip past them quietly, amused and unseen. Your final stop is the cloakroom, where hats rest like sentries and capes hang in orderly submission. A maid offers you your coat and a discreet nod of acknowledgement. You accept both. There's a mirror here too, but this time you don't look. Why disturb the illusion now? You step outside. The night has deepened. The stars, what few are visible above the haze, twinkle like powdered flecks on a navy blue coat. The street is still. No horses, no wheels, only the creaking sigh of lanterns swinging gently in the breeze. You inhale powder, lemon, sweat, and starch. The scents of the evening linger in your collar, in the fibers of your coat, in the very air you carry away from the house. And yet, beneath it all, your own skin. Free, cool, real, you walk slowly. Not because you retired, though. You are but because you not quite ready to return to the present. Right. The world of wigs and powder and whispered etiquette is fading behind you like a dream. But part of you, a powdered echo perhaps, will remain seated in that guest room, towel on your shoulders, scalp tingling with liberation. Let it. The rest of you has somewhere to be. The street you step onto is cobbled and uneven, each stone worn smooth by centuries of carriage wheels, boot heels, and gossip-heavy foot traffic. Your own steps are slow and careful, not from any great sense of caution, but from the strange floatiness that settles in after one has removed an elaborate wig and wandered through candlelit rooms, where powder lingers in the air like unfinished conversations. You are aware of your body again, your scalp, in particular, grateful for freedom and cool air. It breathes. Down the lane, a small figure hurries across your path, perhaps a night watchman, or just a servant fetching something left behind. Their lantern swings with each stride, casting momentary shadows that leap and shrink like theater actors hitting their final cues. Mainstream fact, in Georgian cities, especially London and Bath, the fashionable elite frequently attended evening salons, musical recitals, and dinners that extended late into the night. It was not uncommon for streets to be quietly bustling into the early hours, with hired sedan chairs weaving between footmen and apothecaries closing shop. Overhead, the sky has clouded in a soft blanket of gray that holds the moon like powdered muslin. You imagine someone up there dusting the stars with a sieve. The night is quiet, save for the occasional murmur of wind and the rhythmic drip of rainwater from a forgotten gutter. It's the kind of night that insists upon reflection, and you oblige. You think back to the powder, the way it caught in your throat, the way it settled on your eyelashes like frost. You remember the puff of it around the young man's curls. Right. The flourish of the valet with the silver-handled puff. The woman whose wig concealed an entire set of braided hair, hidden in case of emergencies. Fringe tidbit. Some Georgian ladies, particularly those with thick or unruly natural hair, opted to tuck their own locks underneath false wigs entirely, creating layers of styling that took hours to prepare. There are scattered records of women fainting from the combined heat and weight of these multi-tiered constructions, especially during summer months, or near open fireplaces. Imagine collapsing in a swoon because your hairstyle required its own scaffolding. You shift slightly on the bench, and your coat crackles faintly, some powder still clinging to the inner folds. You brush it away, or try to. Really, at this point, the powder owns you. Maybe someone is still undressing or quietly removing hairpins with a sigh that says, finally. You picture them sitting at a vanity, gently tapping powder from their temples like snow from a windowsill. Someone is doing the same ritual, reclaiming their true shape from beneath the frosted architecture of fashion. Historians still argue whether this post-event decompression, the unpowdering, unpinning, unlacing, was a relief or a sadness. Some memoirs speak of it like escape, others like melancholy, the end of a spell. Was it a shedding of burden or a slipping of mask? Was the wig the costume or the person underneath? You lean back and tilt your head toward the sky, letting the questions dissolve in the misty air. A soft clatter down the street draws your attention. A sedan chair, carried by two broad-shouldered men in navy uniforms, passes slowly. Inside, a powdered gentleman snoozes gently, his head rolling with each jostle, his wig askew like a crown tossed on sideways. He's smiling in his sleep, or maybe grimacing. It's hard to tell at this angle. You stay seated even as the mist thickens slightly, curling around your collar, settling into your sleeves. There's a quiet peace to this moment, as if the world has powdered itself into stillness. Eventually, you rise and begin walking again, turning down a narrower street. Past shuttered shops and carriages hitched for the night. A baker's cart sits abandoned near a cellar door, and the scent of flour and faint yeast lingers like a forgotten lullaby. You pass a small apothecary. The window is filled with bottles labeled in elegant script. Spirits of lavender, elderflower water, powder of orris root, foxglove drops. You wonder how many of these once found their way into the powdering rituals of the night. Perhaps that rosemary-scented wig you admired earlier was a home blend. You keep moving, slower now. There's a cat sitting on a low stone wall ahead. Its coat is mottled, and its ears flick once as you approach, but it doesn't run. You stop a few feet away, the two of you locked in mutual midnight acknowledgement. I used orris root, you whisper to it, unsure why, no wasps. The cat blinks at you. Approval. Indifference. Hard to say. Then it stretches, arches its back, and disappears behind the wall, leaving only silence and the faintest sound of your own footsteps trailing behind you.
Oh.
You reach the end of the lane. Another house looms here, smaller, darker, less imposing than the grand salon you left behind. A single lamp glows near the doorway, and you recognize the ironwork of the knocker shaped like a coiled snake. This is home, or at least, tonight it is. You open the gate with a quiet squeak. The garden path crunches beneath your shoes. Inside, your room waits your slippers, your basin of warm water, your own pillow, blissfully powder-free. But for now, you linger outside the door, 'cause something about the night wants to last just a little longer. It's just until the last curl settles. Just until the last puff of powder dissolves into the breeze. You stand there for a long moment, hand on the door, unsure whether to open it just yet. Not out of hesitation, but because the weight of the evening is pressing more gently now, like a warm quilt. You're in no rush. The world holds still just a bit longer. Finally, with a quiet sigh, you step inside. The entryway of your modest townhouse is dimly lit, the coals in the fireplace now a soft red glow. Your servant, probably asleep on a cot nearby, has left a cloth laid neatly over a tray. A small dish of candied ginger. A note folded in half, and beside it, your dressing robe. You touch the robe with your fingertips, marveling again at how liberating it is not to have something heavy and perfumed pressing down on your skull. No ribbons. No netting. No ridiculous powdered bouffant that tickles your neck when you turn your head. You cross to the mirror not to admire yourself, but to assess the damage. There it is, your real hair, disheveled, a bit flattened where the wig strap sat, and lightly dusted with what remains of the evening's powder. You brush your fingers through it, feel the grit between your nails. You don't mind. Strangely satisfying, like waking from a dream with a souvenir still in your hand. Mainstream historical fact, powdering the hair when done without a wig was considered a statement of elegance and subtlety. Gentlemen might lightly dust their natural hair for everyday wear, particularly if they wanted to appear fashionably modest rather than flamboyantly aristocratic. But this came with risks. Powder clung to oil, so unwashed hair could quickly become clumpy, creating the dreaded chalky mop effect. Your hair, thankfully, avoids this fate. You rinse your hands in the basin and pat your face with the cool cloth left folded nearby. The powder comes off in thin streaks, greasy from sweat and pomade, slightly tinted, smelling vaguely of old flowers and sweetened dust. You're not entirely sure that's unpleasant. Move toward your desk and unfold the note. It's from your valet. You left your glove in the drawing room. I retrieved it. Also, do consider wearing the lighter wig for daytime. Your scalp may stage a revolt. You laugh softly. The man's not wrong. You sit, robe now snug around your shoulders, and reach for the small tin of pomade on the corner of the table. You pop it open, not to use, but to smell. It's lavender-scented, like the powder earlier. The kind used in fashionable salons, and, if the footman was to be believed, also in flea collars. Fringed tidbit. Some cheaper wig powders were bulked out with chalk and starch laced with insect repellent. Additives, sometimes even sulfur. This could lead to unfortunate side effects like itchy scalps or mild chemical burns. Consequently, wealthier clients paid dearly for fine milled powders made with crushed pearls, rice flour, or powdered deer antler. You close the tin and push it aside. Too fancy for tonight. The fire crackles softly as you move toward the armchair beside the hearth. There, resting neatly folded on the armrest, is the white towel you used earlier during dewigging. It smells faintly of lemon and starch. You run it through your hands like a ribbon of memory and then drape it back over the chair, precisely as it was. Historians still argue whether these end of evening rituals, this slow unwinding of powder and pomp, were experienced with a sense of theatrical closure or private vulnerability. Was it like removing a mask at the end of a masquerade? Or more like peeling off armor after battle? Maybe both. Maybe, like all routines, it blurred the lines between performance and reality until neither could be separated. You stare into the fire, watching as the last embers shift and collapse inward. The room smells like old wood, cotton, and ash. No roses, no cinnamon, no bees. You sink deeper into the chair. From this spot, you can see the mantel clock ticking away toward 2 a.m. You should go to bed. But instead, you reach for the small wooden brush near the hearth, the one with soft horsehair bristles. You begin brushing through your hair slowly, rhythmically, letting the scratch and pull of each stroke ease the remnants of the night away. Stroke, scratch, breathe in the background. The rain starts again, soft, barely audible, like someone gently drumming on lace. You think of the woman with the powdered ringlets too tight around her temple. You wonder if she's asleep now. Her valet finally got that curl to stay. If the powder has all fallen off onto her pillow by now. You hope so. You think of the scentless man with the ivory snuff box, and the one who sneezed violently during the quadrille. The powdered courtiers, arguing about what counted as fashionable scent. The wig left too close to the candle. The servant girl with flour on her apron. The mirror. The brush. All of it now is dust. Flecks on your cuffs. Whispers on your scalp. You turn your head slightly, and a puff of powder escapes your collar. It drifts toward the fire, sparkles briefly in the glow, and disappears. Upstairs, the floorboards creak beneath your feet with the honest groan of old wood. Every step a polite announcement to the slumbering house that you finally calling it a night. You clutch your robe around you, even though there's no real draft. Habit, perhaps. Or maybe the faintest desire to preserve some last wisp of the powdered persona you've worn all evening. Your bedroom is waiting, calm and simple. A narrow bed with a turned-down sheet, a chair where your day clothes rest in a soft, rumpled pile, and beside it, a low table with a candle guttering in its final inch of wax. The room smells of lavender sachets, beeswax polish, and just a whisper of pomade that lingers despite your best efforts. You sit on the edge of the bed, running your hand over the linen. Cool, smooth, unpowdered. It feels honest. Mainstream fact. Georgian beds were often short not because people were drastically smaller, but because many believed sleeping propped up was healthier. Fully lying down was considered dangerously horizontal by some risking bad digestion, poor dreams, or the odd chance of being mistaken for dead. You lean back anyway, head sinking into the feather-stuffed pillow. Your scalp tingles where the wig once sat. You rub it absent-mindedly, thankful again that the elaborate concoction is now back in its box, safely banished to the dressing table. You breathe in, a long, slow inhale. No perfume, no starch, just air. Fringe tidbit. Some particularly devoted Georgian wig wearers actually slept with their wigs on, afraid of losing their carefully powdered style by morning. This typically resulted in crushed curls, bent feathers, and the occasional mouse-nibbled ribbon, especially in country houses where nocturnal visitors were less myth than expectation. You close your eyes. The flicker of the candle still dances behind your eyelids, but dimmer now, fuzzier. You think of all the rituals of appearance you've participated in tonight. The puffing, the brushing, the precise angle of the tilt, the quiet negotiation between your vanity and your patience, all of it in service of being seen, admired, maybe even envied. And now, we're gloriously invisible. Historians still argue whether wigs were ever truly about hygiene, as some defenders claimed, or whether they were. It's quite simply elaborate social armor, visible proof of wealth, taste, control. But here in the quiet dark, none of that matters. There is no audience, no gossiping peers, no judging eyes peering through quizzing glasses. Just your head, your pillow, and the faint tick of a clock somewhere downstairs. You curl to one side, the robe shifts slightly. Something powdery flutters from the cuff to the sheet. You smile. The silence here is thick, velvet-like. The kind that wraps around you with gentle authority and says, "No more talking now." The fire is long out. The candle sputters once and dies. All that remains is your breath. In, out. And somewhere beyond the glass of the window, the soft hush of rain tampering down the noise of the world. And now, as the powdered world fades behind your eyelids, the last echoes of Georgian elegance slip quietly out the back door of your mind. The powdered wigs, the satin ribbons, the lavender clouds, they were lovely, strange, a little absurd, and now they are just mist, settling on the edges of sleep. Your head rests lighter now, freed from ceremony. The laughter and whispers of the evening retreat like guests leaving a party, their footfalls muffled by time. You lie still in the hush, limbs heavy, heart unbothered, the weight of the night dissolving with each passing breath. Imagine the softness of a down-stuffed pillow cradling your cheek, the warmth of the bedsheets holding you gently. Nothing is required of you now. No pins to adjust, no powder to retouch, no clever words to think of. The night is done, but your thoughts move like powder on a breeze, drifting, dancing, settling into the corners of your dreams. If one of them lingers, a ribboned curl, a forgotten dance step, let it stay. Let it float there, suspended, without need for answers or endings. And as the last candle flickers out in the grand hall of your imagination, know that all is well. You've been there. You've powdered and puffed, pranced and pondered, and now you are home. Rest now, dear sleeper. Let the quiet take over. Let the powdered past keep watch. Sleep deeply, dream strangely, and wake softly.